Everybody, welcome to study number 8 in the book of Judges in our 3-year Search the Scriptures Bible study program. And today we are on Judges chapter number 7, verse 24 through chapter 8 and verse number 35. And we're going to try to answer 2 different questions again today. The first one is this: Note A, Gideon's dealing with the complaints of Ephraim and with the lack of cooperation of the elders of Succoth and Penuel. And B, the vigor of his pursuit and capture of Zebah and Zalmunna, and the respect that these princes showed him, and what various aspects of character are revealed here. And 2, what temptation did Gideon overcome? Contrast, however, the frequent references to God's guidance in the earlier part of the narrative with the entire absence of this in chapter 8, verses 24 through 27. And why did Gideon, who had given such able leadership in the national crisis, fail to give adequate leadership in a time of peace? And is it true that we tend to rely on God only when we're up against it? Let's look at Judges chapter 7, beginning verse 24 through chapter 8 and verse number 35. Well, Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them as far as Beth-barah." So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they seized the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth-barah. And they also captured 2 of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. And they killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. And they pursued the Midianites, and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was by the Jordan. Judges chapter 8. Now the Ephraimites asked Gideon, "Why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian?" And they challenged him vigorously, but he answered them, "What have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim's grapes better than the full grape harvest of Abiezer? God gave Oreb and Zeb, the Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you?" At this the resentment against him subsided, and Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted, yet keeping up in pursuit, came to the Jordan and crossed it. He said to the man of Succoth, "Give my troops some bread. They're worn out. I'm still pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." But the officials of Succoth said, "Do you already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your troops?" Then Gideon replied, "Just for that, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars." And from there he went up to Peniel, and made the same request to them. But they answered as the men of Succoth had. So he said to the men of Peniel, "When I return in triumph, I will tear down this tower." Now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor with a force of about 15,000 men, all that were left of the armies of the eastern peoples. 120,000 swordsmen had fallen. And Gideon went up by the route of the nomads east of Nobah and Jogbehah and attacked the unsuspecting army. Zebah and Zalmunna, the 2 kings of Midian, fled, but he pursued them and captured them, routing their entire army. And Gideon, son of Joath, then returned from the battle by the pass of Heres. And he caught a young man of Succoth, and he captured him. And the young man wrote down for him the names of the 77 officials of Succoth and the elders of the town. Then Gideon came and said to the men of Succoth, "Here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me by saying, 'Do you already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your exhausted men?'" He took the elders of the town and taught the men of Succoth a lesson by punishing them with desert thorns and briars. And he also pulled down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the tower. Then he asked Zebah and Zalmunna, "What kind of men did you kill at Tabor?" "Men like you," they answered, "each one with the bearing of a prince." Gideon replied, "Those were my brothers, the sons of my own mother. Surely as the Lord lives, if you had spared their lives, I would not kill you." Turning to Jether, his oldest son, he said, "Kill them." But Jether did not draw his sword, because he was only a boy and was afraid. Zebah and Zalmunna said, "Come, do it yourself. As is the man, so is his strength." So Gideon stepped forward and killed them and took the ornaments off their camels' necks. And the Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you've saved us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon told them, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." And he said, I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder." It was the custom of the Ishmaelites to wear golden earrings. And they answered, We'll be glad to give them. So they spread out a garment, and each of them threw a ring from his plunder onto it. The weight of the gold rings he asked for came to 700 shekels. That's about 47 pounds. Not counting the ornaments, the pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on the camels' necks. And Gideon made the gold in an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town, and all Israel prostituted themselves by worshipping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Thus Midian was subdued before the Israelites and did not raise its head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace 40 years. Jerubbaal, son of Joash, went back home to live, and he had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. His concubine who lived in Shechem also bore him a son, whom he named Abimelech. And Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal-berith as their god and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. They also failed to show any loyalty to the family of Jerubbaal, that is, Gideon, in spite of all the good things that he had done for them. Question number 1. Note, first of all, Gideon's dealings with the complaints of Ephraim, with the lack of cooperation of the elders of Succoth and Penuel, and B, the vigor and pursuit of the capture of Zebah and Zalmunna, and the respect that these princes showed him, and what various aspects of character are revealed here. Well, Gideon understood who needed affirmation and who needed a rebuke. He was liberal concerning both of those things. This helps show leadership, that you need, in leadership, you need to be both gracious and you need to be demanding when attempting to lead people. The key is to know who needs the grace and who deserves the judgment. Clearly, the two Midianite kings recognized Gideon as a leader, because he said, Who was it you killed? And he said, Men with the bearing of a prince, just like yourself. They showed respect for his leadership that the people of Succoth and Penuel had not. So in leadership, we must learn to be gracious and demanding and balance those two things. Question number 2, what temptation did Gideon overcome? Contrast, however, the frequent references to God's guidance in the earlier part of the narrative with the entire absence of his guidance in chapter 8, 24 through 27. That's when Gideon makes the golden ephod. Why did Gideon, who had given such able leadership in the national crisis, fail to give adequate leadership in a time of peace? And is it true that we tend to rely on God only when we are up against it? Well, Gideon overcame the temptation to be placed above the Lord. He refused to be called the leader of Israel. Yes, Gideon, like most of us, no longer relied as heavily on hearing the voice of the Lord once peace was established. That was probably why he fell into the error of making the golden ephod in the first place. The making of that gold ephod shows us that he was tempted by the adoration of Israel, but God gave him the grace to overcome it. We're not tempted beyond what we can bear. The more we are able to remain spiritually disciplined in times of peace, the less likely we will have to face major battles that are designed by the Lord to bring us back in line. I hope you're not facing battles designed by the Lord, placed there by the Lord to bring you back in line. If you are, I hope you win them in a hurry and get back in line. I hope this study in Judges is a blessing. Hope you're enjoying the story of Gideon. God bless. Have a fantastic rest of your day.